Two handsome predators roamed America in the shadows of the 1970s, each armed with disarming smiles and devastating charm. Ted Bundy, the poster boy of serial murder, used calculated charisma to lure unsuspecting young women, leaving behind a bloody trail that etched his name as a serial killer legend. Yet lurking beneath the glare of Bundy's fame was another killer, Paul John Knowles, a figure whose charm masked a savage unpredictability that many argue made him even deadlier. Bundy haunted America's nightmares openly, but Knowles, less known yet darker, unleashed a tornado of indiscriminate violence, defying all logic and pattern. In this video, we ask the chilling question: who was truly the more diabolical killer? Was it the man deemed the Casanova Killer, Paul John Knowles, or the charmer, Ted Bundy? Born in the same year, 1946, Bundy and Knowles took starkly divergent paths towards murder. Theodore Robert Bundy began life quietly in Vermont, raised under the shadow of family secrets. He discovered only as a teen that the woman he called his sister was, in fact, his mother. Despite these inner wounds, Ted maintained an outward normalcy: smart, articulate, ambitious. From campaign volunteer to law student, he wore the mask of a model citizen perfectly. But beneath the polished exterior brewed a dark obsession, soon to become his lifelong addiction. Paul John Knowles had no polished life path. His childhood was a storm of foster homes, petty theft, and juvenile incarceration. Born in Florida and raised in chaos, Knowles quickly learned the lawless survival skills of the street. He had his first arrest at age 19 and spent much of his early adulthood behind bars for theft and assault. Prison hardened him and sharpening an innate charm that captivated women through letters. Yet when freedom finally arrived, financed by an admirer he'd manipulated from his jail cell, his true self surfaced. His rejection by Angela Kovic unleashed a terrifying rage, and within hours, he claimed his first life on a dark San Francisco street, and a new nightmare was born. Both Bundy and Knowles were chameleons, adapting personas to trick their prey, yet their styles of deception differed in telling ways. Bundy was infamous for his calculated ruses. With boyish good looks and a gentle demeanor, he often pretended to be vulnerable or authoritative to disarm his targets. In one common ploy, Bundy wore a fake cast or sling, appearing as an injured man in need of help carrying books, a harmless stranger that young women wouldn't fear. At other times, he impersonated a police officer or firefighter, complete with a badge or uniform, to feign authority. According to case files, his MO typically involved convincing a target he needed assistance, or duping her into believing he was an authority figure, then luring her to his Volkswagen. The moment a victim's guard was down, Bundy would strike, bludgeoning her unconscious with a crowbar or tire iron, snapping handcuffs on her wrists, and spiriting her away to a secluded location. His ability to be a master deceiver and manipulator was so refined that survivors later said they didn't realize the danger until it was too late.
He looked like a college student. He was dressed nice, had a green pullover sweater on, nice slacks.
And you say, okay, because he looks like the fabric of the university community. He didn't look like an outsider. He didn't look like we would think about a predator.
Right.
Knowles, on the other hand, was less elaborate in his cons, but equally adaptable. A true chameleon fueled by opportunity. Tall, red-haired, and described as extremely handsome, Knowles leveraged charm when it suited him.
If I would have met Paul John Knowles at a nightclub, I would have gone out with him. He was very good looking.
Unlike Bundy, Knowles didn't stick to a single script. Sometimes he sweet-talked his way into a victim's good graces. Other times, he simply forced his way in with a gun or knife. His very first known murder after escaping jail was a 65-year-old woman, Alice Curtis, whom he subdued during a robbery. Yet in November 1974, the same killer effortlessly played the gracious guest when a stranger, Carswell Carr, invited him over for a drink, only to suddenly turn on Carr and his teenage daughter in a frenzy of stabbing violence. An investigator at the scene recalled it as the bloodiest crime scene he had ever seen, due to Knowles' out-of-nowhere attack with a pair of scissors.
Worked a lot of murders, but that was the bloodiest crime scene I'd ever seen. He was stabbed so many times he bled through the mattress. To me, he was more brutal than Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy's murders stretched from 1974 to 1978, with pauses in between. He was a classic serial killer who stalked, abducted, and unalived with an almost methodical rhythm, often weeks or months apart. His pattern, while evolving, was deliberate. For example, in the first half of 1974 in Washington state, multiple college women vanished one by one every month or so. Bundy would lay low after each crime, savoring the control and evading detection before feeling the compulsion to strike again. He moved from Washington to Utah to Colorado, changing hunting grounds as investigations closed in. There were some bursts of violence, notably one frenzied night in January 1978 when he attacked 4 women in a Florida sorority house in the space of minutes, but these were exceptions. Generally, Bundy's campaign of terror was a marathon, not a sprint, marked by cycles of predatory planning and cooling off, where he maintained his normal life in between murders. Knowles, in stark contrast, was the opposite. A true spree killer on a whirlwind rampage, no cooling off, no pauses. After escaping a Jacksonville jail cell on July 26, 1974, he exploded into an unprecedented spree of violence. Over roughly 15 weeks, Knowles claims to have unalived 35 people, and investigators definitively linked him to at least 18 murders in that period. The scope of his spree was astonishing. Just about everywhere he went, he left a body. Unlike Bundy, who often took great care to hide bodies and evidence, Knowles had little time or interest in covering his tracks during his blitz of violence. The crimes were initially thought unrelated, random tragedies scattered across the map. Only after Knowles was captured did authorities realize they had been dealing with one man's murderous spree the whole time. It's worth noting that spree killers often lack the meticulous planning of serial killers, and their motives can be more erratic. Knowles indeed was far more chaotic, yet that made him in some ways more dangerous to the general public. Ted Bundy's carefully curated MO meant that a specific subset of people, particularly young women with long hair or college students, were at highest risk from him. Paul Knowles' indiscriminate frenzy meant no one was safe. He shot and strangled men, women, children, the elderly, whoever crossed his path at the wrong time. The types of victims each man chose, and what that reveals about their psychology, further underscore how Bundy and Knowles were different beasts. Ted Bundy's preferred victim demographic was remarkably consistent. Almost all were young females, typically in their late teens or early 20s, many of them college students or young professionals. They tended to be physically similar as well, often attractive, slender, with long straight hair parted in the middle, a look eerily similar to Bundy's own former college girlfriend. Bundy's fixation on women was absolute. His murders reflected a deep-seated misogyny and obsession. He even engaged in necrophilia with the corpses of some victims, returning repeatedly to assault their bodies whenever he pleased, which gave him a perverse sense of ownership without risk of rejection. Knowles, on the other hand, had no type. His victims were startlingly diverse. The first victim of his spree was a 65-year-old woman, likely chosen as an easy target during a burglary. Shortly thereafter, he abducted and unalived 2 little girls, sisters just 11 and 6 years old, who disappeared from their home. He unalived adult women, such as 49-year-old Marjorie Howie, strangled with stockings, and 24-year-old Kathy Pierce, also strangled in her home. He unalived adult men. Carswell Carr, stabbed dozens of times, and at least 2 male hitchhikers, and a businessman he pulled over at gunpoint. He unalived teenagers. 15-year-old Mandy Carr, strangled alongside her father. He even murdered a police officer, Trooper Charles Campbell, who had the misfortune of stopping him for a traffic violation. His violence wasn't personal, it was chaotic and indifferent, making anyone and everyone a potential victim. While Bundy's psychological motives were grimly clear, Knowles's random brutality suggested a darker, more primal thrill: power without purpose, violence for violence's sake. Examining crime scenes and forensic evidence sheds light on how each murderer operated and how they were eventually identified. Ted Bundy, despite his savagery, was infamously adept at leaving minimal trace evidence, at least early on. Many of his crimes yielded scant forensic clues, adding to the mystery that astonished police in multiple states. He was careful and methodical, often wearing gloves, using blunt objects he brought or found at the scene, and removing bodies to secondary sites where evidence would be harder to link back to him. In his later Florida crimes, Bundy also left a very distinctive piece of evidence: bite marks. During the 1978 attack at Florida State University's Chi Omega sorority house, Bundy savagely bit one victim, leaving deep impressions. These bite marks became crucial forensic evidence odontologists matched back to Bundy's teeth, providing a rare physical link tying him to the crime scene. Bundy's crime scenes also often lacked the weapon, since he took it with him or disposed of it, and lacked the victim's body, since he transported and concealed bodies in woods or mountains. This forced investigators to rely on fibers, eyewitness accounts, and later, when they had a suspect, on things like hair found in Bundy's car. Paul Knowles's crime scenes, by contrast, were chaotic, varied, and less controlled. Yet ironically, that very chaos produced some leads. Knowles unalived with whatever means were handy, and did so out in the open or in victims' homes without much precaution. As a result, some crime scenes were rich in evidence, even if initially they weren't connected to each other. For instance, at the scene of the car double homicide in Georgia, the father and daughter unalived in their upscale home, investigators found the sheer overkill, 27 stab wounds with scissors, to be a gruesome signature of sorts. It told them the murderer had been in a rage. Early on, however, police in different states didn't know they were dealing with one offender. A strangling in one state and a shooting in another had different MOs. One victim was an elderly woman in Florida, another a young couple in Nevada. The lack of a consistent pattern meant forensic evidence stayed siloed in local investigations. In the end, the law caught up with both, Bundy in a courtroom, Knowles at gunpoint, but not before forensic science and police work had to play an exhausting game of catch-up to crimes that for a long time seemed to have no face. One of the most powerful windows into the minds and methods of these serial killers comes from the voices of those who survived their wrath, the lucky and incredibly brave few who escaped to tell the tale. In the case of Ted Bundy, Carol Durant stands out as a crucial survivor who not only lived through a Bundy abduction attempt, but also helped put him behind bars. In the case of Paul John Knowles, Barbara Maybe Abel is a remarkable woman who endured a night in the grasp of the Casanova Killer and managed to outwit him. Their stories offer chilling first-hand perspectives on how charm turned to terror, and they underscore just how narrow the margin between life and death was when facing these predators.
My name's Carol Ann Durant, and I was kidnapped by Ted Bundy in November of 1974. I had graduated from high school in the spring of 1974. I decided that I would just head over to the local shopping mall, which was only a couple miles from my house. I walked through the mall and was looking in the bookstore window. And a man had come up to me and introduced himself as a police officer. He said his name was Officer Roseland and told me that they had caught someone trying to break into my car. So he asked me if I wanted to go out to my car with him and see if anything was gone. We were at the car, I opened the door and we were looking in, I could see nothing was gone. Then that's when he said, well, we have the suspect that was trying to break in your car at the substation in the mall. Do you have time? Do you want to go over there and fill out a complaint? And I said, sure, I'll do that. So We walked across the street from the mall to another building, and it was back of a laundromat, and tried to open the door like it was the substation, and of course it was locked, and said, well, they must have taken him down to the police station. He's not here. And it's that point that I think I could smell alcohol in his breath a little bit. And I said, can I see some kind of ID? And he flipped open his wallet and he had a badge. And I said, oh, okay. So we walked over on the side of the road and he had a Volkswagen parked there, which I thought was kind of odd, but I thought, oh, he's an undercover cop. We were almost halfway to the police station. All of a sudden, he just jerked the car over and pulled over up on the curb. Then I knew something was wrong. And I started screaming, what are you doing? What are you doing? This isn't the police station. Why are you stopping? What's going on? I was in sheer panic, and he was trying to grab my hands. He got a handcuff on one of my wrists. We were struggling. He never got it on the other wrist. I was punching and screaming and just fighting, and all my fingernails were broken. I knew he was going to kill me. His face and the way he was acting, he was just crazy. He turned into a monster.
Carol's escape was more than just a personal victory. It would be the turning point in the hunt for the serial killer lurking in Utah. She went to the police and provided a clear description of her attacker and his car. Barbara Abel's experience with Knowles was darker, more psychologically terrifying.
My name is Barbara Maybe Abel. My maiden name was Maybe, and I married an Abel. If I would have met Paul John Knowles at a nightclub, I would have gone out with him. He was very good looking. So in 1974, on November the 14th, the day I'm never going to forget as long as I live, I knew something was wrong. And he said, don't turn around or I'll shoot you. And of course, I decided I'd turn around. And I couldn't believe what I did next. Walked him all the way through the house, this little cute house, and something made me go into the bedroom where Beverly was. She was tied up and with a sheet, and she had a gag over her face, and blood was coming out of the gag. I'm sorry. This maniac's in the bedroom with me. He just finished tying up my son in the other bedroom, and I said, get the gag from out of her mouth. My God, she's got cerebral palsy. She's handicapped. What did you do to my sister? I said, did you rape her? And he said, I didn't do anything. I didn't hurt her. And I said, if you raped her, I said, I'm going to kill you. I said, that's my sister. And I knelt down beside the bed and talked to her, and I said, we're okay. I said, I'll give him the money and the keys to the car, and then he can go, okay? So she just nodded her head yes, and I kissed her. And he wanted to take me on I-95 or the Turnpike or wherever he wanted to take me. We went from West Palm Beach all the way up to Fort Pierce, which is at least 60, 70 miles up north. He gets a motel room, and we go, and he said, just pretend like we're married. And it didn't even cross my mind that I would be raped. He had raped me repeatedly over and over, but it wasn't rape in my mind because the man wasn't normal. He was not normal that way, sexually. It wasn't like a real man. He wasn't like a real man. He was trying but couldn't do anything. Impotent. When he tied me up, he always made it real loose. And then the last time, he didn't know that he left the keys on the nightstand. He didn't know that he did that. He just locked the door and went his way. And so I started sawing my sheet thing off, and I got myself loose. It wasn't even 15 minutes later, and the whole world was right there by my side. Then they take me like I'm a criminal, and I go to the Fort Pierce police station. I'm thinking, oh, I need to save him because he's really, really sick. Thinking he only killed like one person, so. Whoa, did I even, I didn't know. I was a copywriter. I know that's what saved my life. I had no idea how many he had murdered. He tried to keep telling me and I wasn't listening. I mean, who wants to hear that? And I was telling him, like, why do you want to write a book? And he wanted to be famous. Famous for what? Murdering a person? I fell in love with him for maybe an instant. I did whatever I had to do.
In the aftermath of their crimes, Ted Bundy and Paul John Knowles diverged dramatically in the halls of public memory. Bundy became, and remains, one of the most infamous names in true crime lore, a figure who has been examined in endless books, films, and documentaries. Knowles, on the other hand, lingers in relative obscurity, a ghostly figure known mainly to devoted crime historians. Ted Bundy's crimes played out in front of the media in unprecedented ways. His 1979 trial for the Chi Omega murders was one of the first murder trials ever televised nationally, turning proceedings into a macabre public spectacle. Bundy, always conscious of image, acted as his own attorney part of the time, delivering statements and cross-examining witnesses with a disturbing charisma that fascinated viewers. By the time Bundy was sentenced to death, he had become a household name. On January 24, 1989, as he was executed in the electric chair, crowds of hundreds of onlookers gathered outside Florida State Prison, cheering and holding signs, a scene broadcast on news around the country. Paul John Knowles, by contrast, never had the chance to cement himself in the public eye during his life, and the media never truly turned him into a legend after his death either. Knowles was unalived by police bullets in December 1974, just weeks after his capture, thus avoiding the long legal process that often turns murderers into infamous figures. There was no public trial, no years of appeals or jailhouse interviews. There are no Hollywood films about Knowles, no Netflix specials solely about him as of yet. If Bundy is akin to a criminal celebrity, Knowles is that dangerous drifter from a half-forgotten crime spree. One reason may be narrative. Bundy's story has a clearer arc, the educated fiend who went from law school to being executed for chilling murders, whereas Knowles' story ended abruptly on a rural roadside in Georgia. Yet for those who dig into the historical record, Knowles' saga is equally riveting and horrifying. What drove Ted Bundy and Paul John Knowles to become the men they became? Psychologists, criminologists, and the public have pondered this for decades. Ted Bundy is often described as a textbook case of the organized, power-control serial killer. From a psychological standpoint, Bundy had a high level of social intelligence and cognitive ability. He graduated college, was articulate, and could navigate various social circles, from political campaigns to university campuses, without arousing suspicion. This allowed him to blend in and gives insight into his psyche. He understood how normal people thought and felt, but he did not share their empathy. Instead, he used that understanding to mimic empathy and lure victims. The hallmark of Bundy's psyche, as noted, was the pursuit of absolute control. He himself admitted that the lust to possess a woman drove him, not just sexually, but completely. Paul John Knowles' psychological portrait is somewhat different, painted more in strokes of impulsivity, anger, and immorality. Knowles lacked Bundy's refinement or higher education, but he possessed street smart and a certain magnetism. His life of petty crime and incarceration suggests he was a career criminal who early on found normal societal rules meaningless or unjust.
If I had to live over again, I wouldn't. You wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it again. It's been that bad. There's no way I'd go through another year of it. I fully intended to be shot before. What's the worst thing that ever happened to you in life? Worst? I was born. Sure. You mean from the time you're born, you've been that bad against life? Well, I look at it like this. I was a hell of a lot better off before I was born than I am. have been. Well, let me ask you something else. What's the best thing that ever happened to you in your life? Nothing. Nothing good. I'm a criminal. I've been preaching since I was a kid. You really are saying that you believe you have a criminal mind? Well, it's been through the roof. My life has been more involved in the criminal sense than with the empathy. I realized there was a lack of, maybe not a lack of love, but a lack of caring with him. So I had no doubt that they loved me, but they just didn't get me. Well, if you love somebody, how can you not give it to them? It's possible. It's possible. Well, perhaps they did give it to them, but they just didn't know how to show it.
Ted Bundy's name recognition and tallied victim count, 30 confessed, possibly more, make him by default one of the most successful serial killers ever, if such a grim metric can be used. He was predatory in the purest sense, a human hunter who selected, stalked, and struck with skill. Bundy's danger lie in his cunning and focus. He had a type, a method, and he stuck to them with deadly efficiency for years. Bundy managed to unalive in multiple states, escape confinement twice, and even manipulate the court system briefly, a testament to how formidable an enemy he was to those pursuing him. His psychological depravity, including necrophilia and prolonged torment of victims, ranks him among the most sadistic offenders. Bundy is, in many eyes, the very definition of evil with a friendly face. Yet, there is a case to be made that Paul John Knowles presented an even more terrifying brand of danger, albeit one less famous. Knowles had virtually no pattern or limit to whom he would unalive. That unpredictability is every bit as frightening as Bundy's meticulous targeting. In a matter of months, Knowles proved himself capable of murdering anyone from an elderly pensioner to a little girl to a highway patrolman. Randomness can be scarier than predictability. A Bundy might leave certain people relatively safe, men or older women.
I'm really surprised that he, quote, has not gotten the notoriety that Ted Bundy got, Charles Manson got, because to me, he was more brutal than Ted Bundy.
It's kind of ironic that Knowles really seemed to want a legacy. He wanted notoriety, but he never got it to the standpoint of what Ted Bundy got. Don't you wish you could have heard those tapes of Knowles?
I would love to have listened to them to try to understand why he did what he did. You don't kill 16, 17, 18, 29, 30, 35 people. You just don't do it. There are people that do, but the average person, they don't go around killing people. And for somebody to kill that many people in that many different types of murders, you know, you strangle them, you stab them, you shoot them, it's something wrong.
In the end, we face an uncomfortable question. Is the greater danger the devil you know or the devil you don't? Ted Bundy is the devil we know, emblazoned in our cultural memory as a warning. Paul John Knowles is the devil most have never heard of, a reminder that many deadly figures lurk in history's shadows, no less malevolent than the famous ones. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on new drops. Thank you for watching.